testing process itself, this is, like I said, fairly similar to the therapy intake process. So basically, the clients will complete a set of intake paperwork, and we've gotten a lot of different types of referrals. So, I would say most often it's been maybe self-referred, or a outside clinician has recommended a client to meet with us for testing. You all have done this as well. So I've definitely consulted with a number of you in terms of, hey, this client is presenting with XYZ symptoms. We've talked about a neuropsych process. There's something else there that we, again, like the screener data and the therapy alone can't fully kind of provide that scope. And of course, the referrals also come from outside providers. Well, let's say they're transitioning from a PHP or IOP, or from a physician or an external therapist. As I alluded, the neuropsych intake is fairly similar to this. The intake, it's the same form that we're completing. The goal here is a little bit different in that we are trying to basically compile what are we looking at and what are we going to test, essentially. And so part of our plan section, we indicate what specific tests we're including, and a good chunk of the neuropsych report itself comes from the client's feedback for their developmental history, their academic or work functioning, all of that good stuff that you see in that biopsychosocial assessment of our therapy notes page. And so again, a little bit nuanced in terms of just identifying the goals for testing, identifying the third party, and basically trying to figure out what areas that we're looking at, and in terms of our testing library, what it is that we are going to actually, finally assess. This sometimes gets fine-tuned. What we'll find sometimes is that as we're engaging in the process, it's like, well, there's some other measures that might be helpful here. So we definitely want to tailor that, or we definitely aim to tailor that to each individual client and how they're presenting. Now, after that initial intake, what happens next is similar to, again, the therapy process, in that we determine scheduling and figure out whether it'll be one testing session or multiple. And this is kind of where the next piece lies, is that in-person evaluation. And this is kind of where we will, after testing, score, interpret, take the time to meet with you all to consult further on our findings. And then about 4 weeks after the last testing session, this is when we host our feedback session, which is where the report is provided. Maybe final kind of, trimmings are happening at this stage, understanding that from the beginning of the intake to the last feedback session could be maybe around 2 months of time that have elapsed. So it's also important to get a final snapshot and making sure that everything is tracking and kind of consistent with the initial reportings there. This infographic was kind of grabbed just from the Neuropsych assessments page on the Light on Anxiety portal. I think it's a very clean way to show kind of what this process looks like.